Hey, everybody, Conscious Medium Brandon Ross, and welcome to the Stream of Consciousness podcast, where we invite guests in that are interesting, compelling, and doing the work. With me is a very special guest from the West Coast, a longtime acquaintance of mine, somebody that I've known over the years. But the reason why I feel he's so compelling with this is because he's truly doing the work. With me is Jim Lanahan, who is a theater manager, tour manager, all around Instagrammer, caring for his mother, caregiving, everything under the sun. You hold so many titles and you do so many things during the day. The fact that you were able to squeeze out an hour and 10 with me is pretty amazing. How you doing, Jim?
I'm great, Brandon. How are you doing?
Was that an okay introduction? I just kind of fly from the cuff.
I thought it was pretty good. I'm jealous that you're sipping on Dunkin' Donuts. We don't have a lot of Dunkin' here on the West Coast.
I was wondering how do you
Yeah,
how do you live for that? So
yeah.
let's jump into this. How did you end up on the West Coast? I know mom's involved. I know there's a lot of things to this, but
hmm
what's how did you choose there?
Well, I was working for a big Broadway producer, and I was living in Washington, D.C. A lot of people don't know, but when Broadway tours go out, they're typically produced by one of two tour companies, and they're both in Washington, D.C. So I was down there in DC, and I happened to be on assignment opening a Broadway tour in Minneapolis when I got the call that my mom had a car accident.
Mm,
And it seemed like nothing seemed minor. She got checked out. They let her go the next day. And then I was flying to Los Angeles for a little R&R when I found out that my mom was having a full-blown stroke. So I rushed back to my hometown, which is just north of Albany, New York, and took care of mom. And ever since then, it has been a bit of a roller coaster with caregiving. Um, as you mentioned, I've made a lot of choices around work-life balance in order to take care of my mom. So
yeah.
one of them was I had to get out of this Broadway environment, which was just eating me alive. It is never ending. Everyone thinks show business is so glamorous. It's not. It's so much work, and I could not anymore manage 6 Broadway tours and also my mom's caregiving and take care of myself. So I started looking for work, and I found a company based in Los Angeles, and the first thing out of their mouth was, "We have work-life balance here. How's your mother?" And I was like, "I'm sold."
Winner,
So
winner, winner, winner.
yeah.
Wow. So that was you probably didn't even need to hear. You were just like, what's the starting? It doesn't matter. Can I afford it?
Mhm.
Like that was you
Well,
probably like, didn't even, have to do any of that negotiation. And it's funny
I
because
agree. And I'll tell you this, though, the universe really does give you whatever you need. So there were 2 companies that made me offers at that time.
mm,
And the other one was based in Los Angeles and another city, the other city being Saratoga Springs, New York, which is literally my hometown.
yep.
So the universe was like, well, here you go. Like, here's an offer in LA that allows you to take care of mom, or here's another offer that splits you between LA and your hometown where your mom lives already. So it really was a moment of ask and you shall receive. And I wound up taking the offer with this company, obviously. And I've been in
Great.
LA or Palm Springs, that's where I am today, since February of 2018.
And it's funny, pandemic time and all that other stuff. It's like we wanted to be close to everybody. We wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be, and looking out for it. I mean, I also have elderly parents that, I mean, don't tell my dad he's elderly, but it's just kind of like when they call, you kind of have to answer, even though half of the time it's a butt dial and it's a,
Yeah.
did you see so and so was on the news, and you're just like, really? Like I'm expecting you to call to say I can't move. I think I broke a hip. And it's, what's funny about that is that it's kind of that intrinsic thing. How did you intuitively know what to pick? Like, what was your process to be like, both are good, both are going to work out? Because the logical part of it is here's the pros and cons, right? You sit down and you go, okay, job world, this is what you do. What was your gut feeling, and how did you process that to be like, this is going to be the best for me? And oh, also my mom. And by the way, I know I got that backwards. It was first mom and then you, but I
It
know you
really
were.
was, and it still is, and I need to fix that. But yeah, you know what's funny is at that time period, I was a finely tuned caregiver. I was not even thinking about myself really. I was not thinking about what I needed other than what does Jim Lanahan need to do today, tomorrow, the next week, the next month in order to best take care of mom.
Mm,
And so the decision making, it was almost like it was partially intuitive in that I understood what I needed and what she needed on a bigger level, but it was also a little pragmatic, you know? And
yes.
so it was very funny because when it came time to make the choice on which job and then other things like how do I get her to California in a wheelchair and how do I which apartment because she lived with me for a minute and so
Yes.
setting up the new life um I've gotten, and this is just part of who I am as a very empathic and intuitive person. I knew exactly what I needed. I didn't have to check in with myself. It was just there all the time.
Yeah. And
um
and I think that's kind of a sign of a stream of consciousness. And that's kind of the,
yeah.
kind of some of the conversation for me is that it's, I think that when we are weighing our pros and cons, sometimes it becomes no brainers. It becomes like gut reactions or reflex. And
Mhm.
it's how we're built and it's how we look at things. And I love your storyline when you talk about mom online. I mean, you're always very, you talk about the frustrations, which I think really shed light on caregiver and caregiving and some of the struggles that we go through where it's a doctor that, the team of I'll never forget this. This was a part where I literally went, holy crap, like Jim's in it. You had a conflict with the doctors, and this isn't a conversation of right or wrong. You just had three different doctors, four different doctors giving four different opinions and four different conflicts, and then a floor nurse that was claiming they were right. Like you just had the perfect storm of like, I feel helpless and I need to resolve this. And how you laid that out was not only impressive, but it was very real. And I think that's one of the things, and I know that a lot of your Instagram followers, is it more Instagram and I know you're on like five different platforms. I follow you primarily on Instagram. I've seen some of your stuff on TikTok. Little off color,
What'd
little
you
off
say?
color. I said little off color,
Oh,
but
yeah, 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 yeah,
a lot of fun there too.
yeah.
But why do you feel like you need to kind of tell that story? I see you championing this, but
Yeah.
talk to me about your thoughts on that.
Well, and to your point, a little off color, I just value authenticity so much. And
I love it.
I've never gotten anywhere in my life by trying to be something I'm not. So, um,
Mwah. Love that.
yeah. Well, you
Love
and
it.
I once worked together in a very corporate environment. I lasted there 8 months because I was like, no, I can't do it. You know, I can't. And I really liked you and I liked like one other person we worked with. But I
She was
had
a
to
riot.
jump. She's is that what they call it these days? A riot? Um
Hot mess, riot, whatever.
she
Good.
is, she still is. But you know, the funny thing is like I have never, so in my theatrical career, I've always been able to be 100% Jim Lanahan. When I
Yeah.
left it, I always had to like tie it up a little bit. After I worked with you, I went and worked for General Electric, and I did it for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons I did it was um money, but also I
Yeah.
wanted to learn how to be a general manager, and that's what I do today in the theater. So I always do things with intention, and I always do make choices where I can be unabashedly myself. So sometimes it's a little off color on my Instagram, you
Oh my God.
know. I've been
Listen.
blocked on TikTok twice. Like,
Oh,
you
have you
know, of
really?
course, it's a badge of honor.
I love it. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
well, for me, it's kind of like, I'm always slightly inappropriate. Nothing dangerous, but slightly, off
Yeah.
kilter. But I think that, like through that evolution and just, from an observation, I mean, when I met you, it was post 9/11. And it
Hmm.
was, you were moving back from the city out of that theater. And then I think, this might be a little out of turn, out of school here, but I think you got out of theater because you were like, I got to get away from that
Mhm.
trauma. I got to get away from what I just experienced down there. But you also, the byproduct was you enhanced all your skills. You were like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm gonna step out of this, go be general manager, and then go back into the pool with a different set of skills. And I mean, it's smart from a career standpoint, but um that process and being in the city, during that time in a theater based environment. I remember the stories you were talking about. I mean, you talked about it like it was the heyday. You were like, this is amazing. Like,
Yeah.
we're hanging out with everybody, and you still talk about it like even on Instagram, like, oh, my friend's back on, what I could really go for. I need that sandwich today. Like
Hmm.
you're going back to all of that. um do you feel like you're missing out? Like, do you think there's like a FOMO component of like, oh, I wish I could always kind of go back there? And do you think you're kind of reliving it in a different way now that you've kind of expanded your career and made the choices you did?
I do think about the old days a lot because living in New York in your 20s is absolutely the greatest thing in the world,
Yeah,
and particularly in my 20s, it was pre 9/11. So New York was my playground. Chelsea, Hell's Kitchen,
yeah,
Astoria, Queens, those were like the hotspots for me. And I loved it, and I lived it, and I dated a bunch, and I worked really hard, and I built my network, and
yeah,
built my toolbox, honestly.
yeah,
You said something very interesting. You said, um, I was transitioning out of theater to kind of like, enhance the career. It's true. Like people, I talk a lot with colleges and
yeah.
performing arts school stage managers, actors, and they're like, well, what aren't they teaching us in school? And I'm like, that's the best question you could have asked me. They're not
Right.
teaching you specific parts of our business that nobody finds sexy, like being a booking agent. That's an
Yeah,
important part of our business. No one knows it exists until you get a job booking. Number two, the best managers and producers in the industry are people that have left the damn business and
yeah,
come back to it, because my toolbox is so robust right now,
yeah.
and I have skills that you're not even thinking about because you have been so, and I say this with love because some of these people are my heroes, Sondheim and such, Lapine, but two names that most of your listeners won't even know. But
No, that
I I
no, give them a shout out, because I think those are things where when I mean, you're one of my favorite people to ever work with, because you always were like raw, authentic, and told me like it was. You're just like,
yeah,
hey, that shtick? Yeah, that shit doesn't work with me. Like
yeah,
you would just be
yeah,
like, can you just like calm it down a little bit? Be like, you
yeah,
were always like authentic. So I think you're coming from a place of authenticity. And
yeah,
the fits of laughter we would get in were a whole other thing. But how we would talk about candidates might be inappropriate even still today.
yeah.
Um, but I think you were authentic. So anybody you want to kind of, talk about along the way, great job, whatever.
Oh yeah. Well, and I say it with love because they're my heroes, but also these people tend to be very trained by the system.
Yeah.
They are, for the most part, white Jewish old men who
Hmm.
have, gay old men who have really contributed to the Broadway landscape in a certain way that everybody worships because they're legends. But guess what you don't know how to do? Manage people. Guess what you don't know how to do? Watch the dollars. So I'm so glad that I left the industry and came back to it because it did make me tough and I hate to say this word, but I'm smart in a different way. I'm not
Yeah.
smarter, but
Oh,
I'm differently smart.
it's about perspective, and I think that's why you're so effective as a life coach too.
Yeah.
Because I think when you're doing coaching work, and I got a little burned out in doing coaching work. I mean, I had a roster list that was a mile long, and I wasn't getting to certain people and whatever, and I really had to take a step back. But by and large, I was like, how do I standardize this? Because it was
Mhm.
like I was having, sometimes 4 or 5, 7 conversations in a day that almost completely revolved around the exact same challenge. But what I was
Mhm.
giving to them was the comfort of the moment because of the experience, or because I understood it and I was able to look at it in certain ways. Why do you think you're so effective as a life coach? And what's your brand, so to speak? I mean, you're always positive, but what's the thing that you feel like sets you apart when you're doing your life coaching?
The brand is very much like sassy best friend energy. That's, in a way, that's the brand. Like I just keep it so real in session.
Yeah.
And I have my demo is very clearly women 35, 55 and gay men of all ages. And they
We
cannot
have we
believe
have the same demographic.
you.
We have the exact same demographic. Just letting you
Yeah.
know by
I
accident.
mean,
Although I tweak a little bit
is
higher.
anything by accident?
Yeah, if they're widowed, there's that. Like I have that
Yeah.
checkbox. I don't know if you do yet, but
It's funny, like, and I, again, it's just like, I am just so authentic with them. Like the other day,
yeah,
I made a really inappropriate joke about dating a football team. And two of my clients
just not a
DM'd
football
me
player, but a team.
a full team. And two of my life coaching clients wrote me a little message saying, like, that's my life coach, and like stars, you know what I mean? Like, because they love how real I am with them. I've also
Yeah,
been through a lot in my 49 years on the
yeah,
planet. I have been, I grew up fat, I grew up gay, I grew up the child of Irish Catholic alcoholics. I grew up watching my dad beat my mom up. I then watched him cheat on her repeatedly. I then found out that I had other family members out there in the world. I mean, I lived through 9/11. I am a caregiver. I have had two different separate careers. It goes on and on.
yeah,
And layer on top of that, I'm really quite like intuitive and very empathic. So, how do I come at life coaching? I don't think about it. I open
yeah.
it with the most open headspace I possibly can, and I just let it flow.
And I'll tell you, with my experience, I will ask this question, which is a little digging a little deeper. You can't not go through all of those things and not have that aha moment and flip the switch from being a victim or being a martyr to being like, oh no, I've got to look at this the other way. Like you could have very easily said all of those things over and over again and sat in that pocket of like, well, what are you going to do? I'm the subject of this, I'm the subject of that. Where
Mm.
identification is not the difficult part, overcoming it is. What do you think was the process, or did you even have a moment where you flip the switch and you're just like, I'm not a victim. I am not going to be the minority here. I'm not going to be that, because that's one of the things that I think you have this emboldenedness too, that I can tell a switch was flipped for you. It absolutely was. Do you know when that time was, or was it an evolution?
I think it was an evolution. And I don't think of it so much as I'm not going to be a victim. I think of it more like, of course, you're reacting to a certain situation in this way because you have been through it.
Mm,
Right. So one of my favorite expressions, and I'm going to do a post this week about it for coaching, is we are not what happened to us. We are not what they said about us. However, what they said and what happened to us concretely inform how we think
yeah,
about things to this day. And so the switch is to overcome that and realize that it's actually not what they're saying. It's not
yeah,
even how you feel about what happened.
yeah,
Take a bigger step back and think about it. And so when I have a rough day caregiving and I want to go get the double cheeseburger meal at McDonald's because food is my love language, my self-care language,
we have so much.
I'm
We have so much in common.
I know, I know. I mean, but now I have the ability to say, okay, but exactly why are you feeling this way, and what's
Yeah,
going on? And so I don't know if I flipped the switch as much as I just really learned to kind of love myself and pay attention to myself over the years.
yeah,
And it's been hard not to when you have the life I've had. I have been hit over the head with messages of this isn't right, so how are you
yes,
going to
yes.
address it? Yeah.
So really what you're admitting to is that like spirit had to try and move you into where you needed to be. And whether it was
Hmm.
through mistakes or epiphanies or realizations or circumstances, you kept kind of moving into that. And I think that's kind of a hallmark of highly intuitive person, to be honest with you. I
Yeah.
think it's one of those things where and people that might not have their intuitive gift in order tend to kind of take that Eeyore stance and be like, oh, woe is me, or it's a cloudy day out. And by the way, I saw your TikTok this morning bitching that it was 53 degrees out. I mean, come
Hmm.
on. And you had to switch to hot coffee.
It's so
It,
crazy.
just a little love from upstate New York. It was 13. degrees today.
Yeah.
It was one of those classic, mornings where you're like, is it really December? This should be like mid mid January. And it
It
was,
is a hot coffee day, and I'm doing it out of my favorite upstate bakery
oh my
place. So,
gosh. Do you
yeah.
know that I still get comments on that video that I
Yeah.
did when I went to go visit her? And then she came in and visited me here in the shop. And I'm going to have her on the podcast here. This is the worst time of the year for her, but I'll catch up to her in the new year. But
Mhm.
talk about authentic people, and it's funny. Those of you that don't know, what had happened. Jim was lamenting that he wasn't near Leia's cakes, so
Yeah.
I made a video going in there for Jim. And I
Uh,
met her, and it was kind of it was just a funny thing. I'm like, Jim Lanahan says hi, and the whole place went nuts. It was hysterical. It was one of those things where,
it's my
here
little
you are in
hometown bakery.
California.
Yeah.
Yeah, here you are in California, and you're just like, oh, I'm missing home, and if I could, I'd make a beeline to Leah's cakes. And
Hmm.
it kind of brings me to a point of like your influence. I mean, we talk about influencers, and you've got your top brass ones, the K girls and all that stuff, but you use your influence in such a positive way where you're like, listen, this is a true to form thing, where it's like, listen, you take it to heart where money is energy and you can vote with your feet. And you bring that up, about. And I know you do a lot of charity work. I also remember kind of the outspokenness that you had with, when there was a charity that you were connected to that wasn't playing by the rules, and you called them out on it. Jim, like, it was balls. It was balls.
I
Talk
really
about
called
this
them
stuff.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did
Well,
talk about this because, listen, my Sundays revolve around your KTLA reports, just to let you know. I
yeah.
really did. At the breakfast
It's
table, my
hard.
kids know you because we watch the KTLA report.
So, for your audience, KTLA is the number one news station in Southern California,
Mm,
and I have gotten very close with several people that work there, and several people that have recently left the station for other opportunities. And
mm.
but for all of COVID period, I watched it religiously. 5 hours on Saturday, 5 hours on Sunday. I would blog about it. I had nothing else to do. I was home during COVID, right?
Right.
And next thing you know, the people on TV are seeing my Instagram and they're using my ideas as stories. And then the producers would start like messaging me and saying, like, can we actually use your video? And then next thing you know, the host of the show, I mean, she's a dear friend to this day, Lynette Romero, and her
Yep.
co-anchor Mark Mester are dropping my name and just saying like, hey, you know who would love that? Jim Lanahan would love that. We should ask Jim Lanahan the best place to get bagels in LA or whatever. So, and next thing you know, it became like I was the president of the fan club, executive producer, and part-time co-host of the show.
Well, I really thought that's where it was going. I really did. I thought at least you were going to be doing special reports. I thought
Yeah.
at least, you would kind of do like on spot things and be like, listen, on Sunday mornings, I'm not getting up at the crack of ass, but I'll do your on spot at the end of,
Mm-hmm.
your 9 o'clock hour or something. Like, I could see you doing
Yeah.
that. Can we pre-record this? I could see you doing something like that. And of course, they had a whole big shakeup. Was the shakeup because of the exposure of what needed to kind of get shown, or was it mutually exclusive from that? To that, because I know you're still connected to Lynette, and she kind of had to do what she needed to do.
Yeah, the station's owned by Nexstar Media. They're a Texas company. They're very, very conservative. Most of their stations actually do like stories that espouse some MAGA principles. So
Yeah,
um,
there it is. There it is.
there it is. And so, you know, you have the number one powerhouse station in Southern California. Nexstar doesn't know how to manage this. And
Yeah.
then Lynette, who is a veteran anchor there, 27 years in the market, gets another opportunity, and they botched her transition to the new opportunity. That not only did they botch trying to save her and keep her, but then they botched how they talked about it publicly, and then they botched how they handled her co-anchor sticking up for her. It went on and on,
Yeah.
and if people are interested, they can go Google Lynette Romero, Mark Mester. It was everywhere. But to your point, I think management botched it up.
Yeah.
Management also botched it up when there absolutely should have been a viewer segment. They should have had me on. That was so clear, They
It's
should
so
have had
clear
me
they
do
should have
like a
they
send
should
Jim
have had this
Lanahan to
about
the
me
county fair.
somewhere. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And just let me like go eat fair foods and talk about it like
Yeah,
enthusiastically. Because what made that show so successful, and again, it's the authenticity factor.
right.
We saw ourselves and our friends on TV. That's why we watched it for 5 hours every day. And
Yeah,
when you see something in yourself, in whoever it is, the anchor on TV, your life coach, your parents,
yep.
your mentor, that's when it's the most impactful. And so they were stupid not to actually let me and a few other viewers in.
Isn't it also though, that level of authenticity as to what makes you such a good coach and why we get good at what we do, whether it's podcasting or, videos or advocation. Isn't that what makes us good? Is that you can say, okay, well, you're human, but this is, I'm going to call it spade to spade, because, whether you were commenting on somebody's, wardrobe, which is second to none, by the way, second to
Mhm.
none. Some of your adjectives are flat out hysterical. But it's also like your authenticity drips through from the standpoint of like, listen, I just I can't abide.
Mhm.
And, you dive into that. Did you find a lot of shift with this? You bring up, the conservative conversation, and there is always a backlash, and there's always two sides and that sort of thing. Did you find a lot of challenges in LA or throughout the theater community with conservatism? And kind of that play to be like, well, if we can't come up with a counterbalance, we're going to try and take it over. And I've seen that kind of be part of it. Do you think that's part of the conversation we should be having too, about like where lines need to be drawn and where they need to stay?
Uh, yeah, I do. It's really hard, actually. It's so funny. I live in there's this perception of Northeast educated liberal elitists, and
And we're
I'm
good
like,
at it.
well, I'm really good at it. And I live in a bubble. And then on top of it all, I work in live entertainment.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, I'm really lucky. I don't actually, in 2015, during the rise of Trump, I did not realize what was happening because that's
Yeah.
not my life. That's not my world.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of us understood how he got elected until he was elected for like a year, and we saw it in action. We're like, this is who these people are,
Yeah.
And I'm not saying those people in air quotes, but that's who these supporters are. And it's like, so have I adjusted or had done anything different? Not really, but I'm really lucky too.
Yeah.
My point of view on to answer your specific question, my point of view is I have to just be unabashedly myself again. Like,
There you go.
so I can't possibly allow your rhetoric on my page, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, if it doesn't, if it's not authentic and it's not coming from a place of respect. You're allowed to
There it
not
is.
agree with me, but you're not allowed to disrespect me in my space, And I don't uphold that because Jim Lanahan needs that. I uphold it because I need to create that safe space for everyone else to enjoy themselves.
Yeah. And I think
That's what a good creator does.
I think you're nailing it with that part of the conversation where it's like, I don't have to agree with you, but you
Nope.
can't go about it in a way where you're going to step on my toes all the time. Like, I don't want
Right.
to have my toes stepped on. And I think that's, when people kind of have that staunch, kind of, whether it's conservative or liberal. I mean, liberals can be the exact
Mm-hmm.
same way. I think
Yeah.
it's, and I think we've all kind of, had that. And by the way, I take pride in not going all the way down the political conversation here on this, but at the same time, I think it's something that would be very real for you to manage with that when you're in, theater and entertainment. I mean, there's a certain level of politics to it
Mm-hmm.
that you have to, when you're in a different town every week and you're in, and it's not, I'm glad that we've evolved from talking about things as a lifestyle and just treating them as is. And I think you fully represent that. Like, you have your moments where you're like, hey, this is just who I am, but it's no longer a label. Like, I think you do that you're one of the best examples I can think of somebody that's just, you are who you are. You're not trying to beat the drum for anything. You're just like, here it is, take it or leave it. You're the one that's comparing it to this or having statistics. And I think that's the key of being so authentic. And it's funny. Now I want to do the segment where we talk about the most interesting thing in your chart. You're going to love this. All right. So pulling up your chart here, you've got a couple of very cool things. Now, how much astrology do you do? Like, do you work with astrology at all? Because I'm going to bring up Heather Carlucci next, and
No, bring her up, but I don't know it. I don't know enough about it. So you're
oh,
teaching
good.
me.
So I can completely talk about something like as in, and I sent it to you on your phone, so you do have it in case you want to take a look
I'm
at
looking
it.
at it.
But everybody's going to have it, right there next to us. So you've got two very kind of cool things going on here. First of all, I'm going to point out your mom. Your mom's sitting there in the 12th house. That is your South Node and Saturn sitting in the 12th house. This is hopes and dreams and fears and losses. So you have this conjunct with the South Node with Saturn. Saturn represents the mother in the 12th house. As you're sitting in Gemini, you're a little bit, dare I say, a little bit of a mama's boy, but it is about your mission. The South Node is kind of about, it represents a past life that you had. It represents that connection that you have with her. That is why you're so committed to her, cover to cover. Like, it's sitting right there. And part of the reason why you do so well in theater, I mean, look at the 7th house. Your son, and by the way, for a Capricorn, boy, you work your tail off. So when people ask you that what your triad is, which is, your sign, your sun, moon, rising, you're a Capricorn sun, you are a Cancer rising, and then you're a Virgo moon. That could be a really tough conversation when somebody tries to permeate your inner circle. In other words, your inner circle is only going to have 2 or 3 people, but you cannot mess with that because with that Virgo moon, oh, you will cut a bitch with that. And that's sitting in your 3rd house, and you've got this great triad going on with why you're so outgoing and why you're so well liked is because with your sun sitting in your 7th in conjunct with Mercury, you're a great communicator. You're somebody that can really speak the speech. You are great about relationships. This is part of the reason why you're a great coach, right? And then the 3rd house sitting there with the moon is about how your communication style is. You're about tough love. You're not about, bullshitting it. And then in your 11th house, you've got Mars sitting there, which creates a really nice triad for you, which allows you to be balanced. You're great at advocacy, and you're also going to be very strong with that circle. And again, you probably have different layers where it's like, listen, you've got my core group, and then you have the next group, which is just on the outside of it, that is still equally as close, but might have come in later in life, like say Lynette or Heather or someone like that. That's like, hey, super important to you. That's also kind of in your ride or die tribe where you go, okay, I'm not gonna allow you to treat her this way. You know what? I'm gonna take on a company in Texas. And by the way, that Mars in 11th house is all about advocacy because it's Taurus. Boy, your earth energy you're a hard earthling, man. Like you're hardcore with that. But you also allow people to kind of do what they need to do. Like you can really accept different strokes for different folks. Because in your 5th house, you've got Uranus, and your 8th house, boy, relationships are kind of go big or go home for you, aren't they?
This is why I'm perpetually single.
It
has to be really perfect and really important for me to invest in it. Otherwise, I'm like, okay, see it. Next, moving on.
But we shared that box of Twinkies, and then you're like, and? You're like, it was just a Twinkie.
Exactly.
Yeah, but with the conjunct, and this is, I mean, it's kind of your superpower in a way because you've got Jupiter, Venus in conjunct, which also allows you to really kind of understand masculine, feminine energy together in that creative Scorpio house, which is, I mean, we're going to keep this PG, but, in the 5th house with Uranus there, you've got to look at things in a different way. So your standards are going to be high. You've got this square thing where you're like, oh no, here you haven't. And it's like, and we're not just talking about the basic things as to why you would cross somebody off the list. Like, you know, if in the first 10 minutes they turn around and they say to you, like, oh, you take care of your mother. And you would just be like, you know what? This is over.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to pay my half of the bill. You're going to pay your half of the bill. And you don't even deserve for me to pay that.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
you would say that. But if somebody said, you know, I think Lynette could have done it differently, you would be like, okay, I'll listen to that. But maybe you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like I can see you
Yeah.
saying something like that and
Yeah.
say, I'm going to chalk this up to your ignorance, but this isn't going to go well from you for here on. But your chart has really kind of made you built for three things. First and foremost, absolutely taking care of mom. Like you two have a past life together. You're tethered to this. Maybe this is you guys in role reversal where she took care of you in the last life and you said, you know what, I'm coming back and I'm going to make sure I take care of you. The second thing is like, you know, this gregarious seventh house relationships, like you are a networker, you're a spider networker. Like I know this one, I'll connect you with this one and blah, blah, blah. And last but not least, like your standards are so high. Yeah, I hope you kind of work out that single thing.
Yeah.
Do, do you feel though that you're built in a way where you can kind of handle like I think you enjoy your standards. Like I don't think that you're somebody that's like I have such high standards and you need to either meet them or not and it's a game to you. I don't think it's a game. I think you just are just genuine about that.
Yeah, I used to I had a friend in my 20s who we used to call her it's gonna sound arrogant, but follow me. So we had very high
Okay.
standards. We had similar like like what we wanted out of people, what we wanted out of friends, what we wanted out of our careers, what we wanted. And we would meet people all the time. We were in our 20s in New York City, and we had people that we knew were like us,
Yeah.
like super smart, super motivated, go get it, like grab life by the and go go go.
Well, your
High
Mar
expectation.
your Mars is in Taurus in the 11th house.
Yeah,
This is a great story connected to that for
but
sure.
everybody else we just called humies, like just normal humans. We're superhuman. You guys are normal humans. We're X-Men. You guys are regular earthlings, like. And so
Mm.
but it's so funny because he very quickly settled and married a guy who was just so not worthy of him. He married a Hume, you know what I mean? And I haven't settled yet, and here I am, single and 49 years old. So, but I don't tell you that to sound arrogant, other than like I've always been acutely aware of exactly what I wanted, and
Yeah,
how we wrapped our head around it was very much kind of judgmental because we were in our 20s, and I
sure.
didn't yet have the self awareness to understand that all of it's okay. We're all just living in a big, not even a spectrum, but it's more like a sphere, and we're all just dots in this 3D space. And like, I understand that now.
Yeah.
Back in the day, no, you're just not one of us, and that's fine. Moving on. It was very Heathers, if you remember the movie Heathers. It
Oh
was
my
very
gosh.
Heathers. Yeah,
Totally, totally.
yeah,
So
yeah.
what um yeah, of course you would totally go with you would totally go with understanding the click part of that as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the, um to the Christian part of that. But that's also we talked a little bit about Heather and how and you guys do your own kind of podcast. And again, you do it whenever you feel like you need to do it. But she's a medium, she's very good, she's out of the city, and she also like how do you guys click with that? Like how is it working with a medium? It sounds kind of crazy, maybe it's self-indulgent, but I'm sometimes tough to work with. Go figure.
Oh, that's
But
funny.
how is it to work with her? How is it to like what's the free flow of like what you guys try and get out of stuff?
She and I share a best friend. So that's how I met her. And so I immediately loved her. I was invited to dinner at her house on her terrace in Chelsea in New York. And I immediately was like enamored with this life. Not
Yeah.
just the gorgeous apartment, not just like she's so chic, she's
Hmm.
effortlessly chic. She's every gay man's vision of what a lady should be. Her parents live in the Canary Islands.
Oh
She's
my
an
gosh.
Italian Jew. I mean, she's literally everything, right? And then on top of it all, and she did tell me that she's psychic, medium, medical intuitive. She didn't tell me any of that until one day we were sitting at lunch in the Lower East Side, and she
Mm.
said, there's somebody behind you. And I'm looking, thinking probably a daddy. Like, should I be, is the daddy a Hume or can I
She's
date him?
she,
You
she's
know,
a she's your wingman for the afternoon.
or well, she's been in the past, so
Mhm.
I was like, what, who, like who, and so Heather did that thing that I now know that she's working. She kind of looked up to the right and she went, he's saying, Jets, it's me. And I was like, Jets is my childhood nickname from my family. Like, what is happening? So we
Oh,
were with our mutual friend, and my friend Kara goes, okay, she hasn't told you yet, but she's a full on psychic and she's coming out to you right here at the seafood restaurant. And I was like, this, I was like, what? And so then I realized person behind me is probably passed. And
yep.
and I said, but do you see a name? Like who, what? And she said, there's an L on his shirt and it's a striped shirt. And I knew immediately it was my Uncle Larry who had just passed a month prior. And
Oh,
he
wow.
said, he wants me to say thank you. Oh no, he wants me to say, tell your mom thank you because my mom took care of him as he died. So, it was kind of like,
Mm,
holy crap. So that's how she came out to me. And so I'm, empathic enough, intuitive enough where I'm completely open to it. I
mm.
find her amazing and mesmerizing on so many levels.
Yeah.
And she recently left New York City after a lifelong resident, left New York
Yep.
City, lives upstate now, well, downstate. You and I would call that downstate, but they call it upstate.
She's in Westchester.
Yeah, she's down there, up there. But yeah, she and she's miraculous. And it's this dynamic that we have that is so much fun because we can just kiki and then she has this great ability and then I can add in life coaching. We've had some interest from some producers who wanted to pitch us to networks for shows and stuff.
Oh my
So
gosh, so much to unpack with what you just said. Because the first part is how about that? Somebody coming out to you. Second of
mm,
all,
yeah.
right? Like, hi. And it's funny because I always joked around about that too. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm coming out. And people are like, okay, maybe. I didn't get that from you, but okay. And
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, I'm a medium. And they're like, oh, okay. All
Hmm.
right, I got it. But there is a process about coming out, when you're a medium
Yeah.
because, you're in that spot and that authenticity. And I've watched a few of her videos and I've seen some of her readings and, she's a real deal. I mean, and by the way, when mediums connect with one another, they know the difference. They know like, they might be early in their career, they might not be fully developed, or they've really got their act together. She's got her act together.
Yeah.
um and it's interesting too when the type of life that you can lead with this. It's not an easy road. It's not like you think you have this ability so everything's going to be easy. No, you're just realizing the karmic lessons that you have to kind of clean up. And before we talk about what kind of offer you would get from or interest from a producer, were you surprised when I told you I was a medium? I mean, you sat across the desk from me. We were in the same industry. And then all of a sudden you're like, I mean, when did you see it? Like, did you just see me post something and be like, oh, all right, well, he's a medium? Like, well,
No, yes and no. So back to the conversation about Humies. You were never a Humie for me.
huh,
You always brought way more to the table. Yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
everyone else in that room was a big fat Humie, to be honest, that you and I sat in that bullpen room. But I
Mhm.
always knew like, okay, Brandon, like he's got more to offer. You're also just extremely charismatic, and you're also like, you when you just said about what you just said about coming out,
Yeah.
I also, and I know you'll understand how I mean this with love and with support. I also never thought of you as like completely hetero either. Like I think of you as kind of
Right.
like a little of everything mixed in, if that makes sense.
Well, it's
So
it's
I
energy.
knew that about you already. Like it didn't surprise me at all that your Brandon's very multifaceted and there's just another door that opened up.
Apparently I have to be aware of all the doors.
Well, that's the hardest part though. Wait, so that's exactly what I was going to say to you. And I should say her name, Heather Carlucci. And if you're on
Yeah.
Instagram, Heather Carlucci Medium is her Instagram handle.
Yes.
But the biggest thing about Heather coming out was
Yeah.
doing it to herself, because for years, for decades, Heather owned restaurants in New York. If you go back to old food challenges on the Food Network, you can see Heather all the time. She was
I
a
saw
popular
I
host.
saw her talk about that. So I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
whoa, that's like, I'm like,
Well-known chef.
and
Yeah, in the New York area.
I have an affinity for cooking. Like
Mm,
I got bit by the bug. I like to do these meals of like, and this has, I don't know, I had no idea the baba ganoush could taste like I'm making stuff
yeah,
that I'm
yeah.
like, oh, there you go.
And
I
so coming out to herself was the hardest part, honestly,
Yeah.
and giving herself permission to do it full time and take the leap. And she's a single mom and she lives in New York City. Oh my God, my finances and all the things,
Yeah.
that was the biggest coming out, I think. And
And
I think probably for you too, right? Like, isn't that
oh
why
yeah, I
you
mean,
did it later in life?
yeah, having all of the, burdens of, family and house and mortgage and, having all of those things and then being able to balance that. I mean, I worked as a consultant. It's funny we bring up the GE thing and how, so many things like how that business was built on that GE contract,
Mm-hmm.
and what have you. But I was struggling with I'm not happy, and I weighed 440 pounds. I mean, you knew me at my heaviest. You
Mm-hmm.
knew me when I was like, where the suit that I had was, two suits too big for everybody else. And it was, I just realized how unhappy I was. Well, part of that was living authentically. And I would go into interviews with people, and what I was really doing was reading them. I wasn't, I could look at the resume in 3 seconds and tell you exactly what they were about and, everything else and have a 2-minute conversation. I didn't need to sit with them for a half hour, but instead I was connecting with them. And I would, have something connective in terms of like who they were and know what my role was going to be to them. And I really fine-tuned, we talk about how you got out of theater. For me, that corporate world and doing HR, and I can't tell you how many mediums I've met over the years that were in HR or something connected to it, because the interview and that high interaction was so important. But that was a time for me to kind of fine-tune where I was at and what I was doing, and being able to just kind of explore that and take the leap. Now, probably my biggest lesson in all of this was thinking I could just apply like a corporate metric to doing mediumship, and it was just, I failed miserably. Like some of my biggest growth came in the failure of thinking I could just take all of that old shit and then apply it to, well, you need process, you need procedure, you need blah blah blah. No, you need spirit, you need to be a
Yeah.
little organized, and you need to surround yourself with people that have the same intention you do. Like,
Yeah.
that's the difference. That's the difference. So for me, and I think because of that high empathy, I could understand that it was so funny. I do have to share this with you. When you had said to me, like we shoot the shit on Monday, and it would be like, I don't know if you remember this conversation, but you're like, yeah, I had a date on Friday, and I go, oh, how did it go? What's her name? And you looked at me and you just went,
Because I was like, dude, come on.
it was so funny because but I never looked at you that way. So maybe that's kind of where where you go back to you saying like be multifaceted. Like that's not well, I knew that you might have had a tendency, or you might have had, a way about that, but I saw it as empathy. I saw it as in kindness. I saw it, that way. I was looking at it in terms of that. And then you were like, yeah, he was hot. You were just like, you were like, do you want the deets or no? And I'm like, oh, I'm good, but that's awesome. And then,
Yeah.
but then for me, I also realized that you trusted me. Like it was like, because this was 20 something years ago. This was still when, you didn't just drop that, Jack was not on TV yet.
Mhm.
There were things that were still kind of there and not there. But for me, it was you helped me develop. because I realized I didn't look at people that way. And I realized where I was, because my conditioning growing up in a Catholic,
Mm,
household, and it wasn't mom and dad, it was the place I went to on Sundays, were like, oh no, you don't. And
yeah.
you helped me realize, like, that's not, I was grateful that I wasn't built that way. I was grateful that I wasn't going to carry that bias.
It's
And
funny though, like energetically, I knew that you didn't, and I knew that I could tell you who I had gone out with a couple of days prior. And at that point, you hadn't told me yet about your family that is LGBTQIA.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so there is something energetically about you that presents as very open. And I think that's what I was getting at before about like
right.
there was way more to you than just the box that I saw there. And I also think like you recruited a special group of people. Like, not everyone knows this, but we sat in like groups and pods at that job, and our little pod was the most fun, the most spirited, the smartest kind of. And I don't mean smart like book smart, but like people smart, like wise, And the other parts of the room made a ton of money, but I would rather have a pap smear than have lunch with those people. We won really at that job, so I
Uh,
think that you were a really good example of somebody who, by
yeah,
nature of being true to yourself, even if you weren't even there yet fully, you understood the value
yeah.
of recruiting the authenticity. And what that ultimately was for our little group was diversity, because we also had an Indian girl that worked with us. We had the crazy one, right? You had the gay one. Like you were like ragtagging it over there, and
Uh,
it worked.
and what was fun about that was that it was, again, it was kind of on that, running by, it was proving that intuitive value, right?
Mhm.
And that was actually when I started to learn that validation was a thing, right? And at the same time, a lot of mediums kind of get they get credit for being shock and awe, right? Like, oh, do you know what he's doing? And it's like, oh, your grandmother said this about the other kid, and all that other stuff. And that's not my style. What my style is to be much more of like, you got to trust the process. You got to be able to kind of
Mhm.
go that route. And that's why I was talking earlier about how you intuitively, selected LA and, found that to be the best for mom. Like, there's a process in that. And there's, being able to identify people over the years that had sheer talent. It was when their human or humany, thing would get in the way. That's where the relationship would go sideways. And it's funny, because when you find authentic people, you don't have to explain to them why they're authentic.
Yeah.
And that's what I always kind of looked for. And I remember that, some of the people that that you spoke of, and I'm still, we're all still kind of connected in this crazy, social media world. It's great to see them bloom. It's great to see. It's like a no-brainer. It's like, oh, they'll fall off your radar for, 6 months or a year or 3 years or whatever. And then they'll pop back up and you'll be like, hot damn, you did it. Whatever the
Yeah.
thing is, you're like, you always wanted a family of three, and now you got the chaos you always wanted. God bless you.
Yeah.
Or, you always wanted to find that person to move to, West Virginia where nobody will bother you. Whatever the deal is, like, you did it. You did the thing that you wanted to do. And it's amazing. Yeah, so listen, we're gonna head towards towards the tail end of this, and we're gonna do the thing that I love to call 5 good minutes. So, Jim, here's the rules. Since you didn't read anything I sent you, and it's sitting in the nether,
It is. I'm so sorry. I didn't get an
it's
email. I didn't get the emails.
it's
I'm
okay.
I'm
It's totally
totally
it's
I'm white knuckling this entire thing.
and by the way, isn't that where we're at our best? And
Yeah.
before I even say this, before I say the rules on this, one of the funny things that I used to love when we would like call each other and like act like we were busy, but we were really talking to each other.
Because we had a quota. Remember, we had a phone call quota, and I was like, I'm not good at
How many
this.
connects do you have today? And I thought it was funny. Do you remember that? Like, how many connects, how many visits, and then like you would have like one legit visit, and then
Yeah.
you would have, and then you would just, go through the entire like corporate tree of like, saw this one, saw this one, saw this one. You add one name on that like won't be there next time you go. And then you would just, you sit there and be like, oh, I got my 25 connects. I got my 10 visits. I got,
Yeah.
I'm really driving, and they'd be like, well, I'm seeing your performance, it's not really there. Well, I don't know what else to do. Maybe it's the economy. It's like the
Yeah.
conversations we would
It
have.
was such a weird place to work. It really was. But yeah, you were a good mentor. You taught me the game. So by the end of it, I was
uh,
killing it. You know what I mean? I was like, oh
like,
yeah, I got this down.
and then I'll never forget it. There was one thing where you kind of wanted to like be in that sweet spot. The goal was 25. But if you were, you needed a day or so that was at 23, and you needed that day that was at like 33. And you had this day where you were at like 58. And I went, whoa, 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 whoa. Do you remember this?
I do remember. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Pulled together. I pulled together, like staffing. I'm looking at it, I'm like, ah, shit. And you just one up me, because this is what you did. This was so awesome. I call you up. We have a 3-way conference call. It's you, me, and the
Crazy.
yeah, your words, not mine.
Uh-huh.
And we're on this, and I go, hey, I'm just pulling up the numbers here. And you're like, uh-huh. And I think you were sipping out iced coffee too, by the way. You're like, uh-huh. And you're like taking the sip. And I said, so listen, remember when I said, you just kind of float this and you kind of do that? You're like, uh-huh. And then I'm like, listen, you like, the goal's 25. You start doing like 57 like this, and like it's gonna throw shit off. Like people are gonna start looking at this and be like, why can't you do more? I go, you got to kind of tailor that. You didn't miss a beat. You took a sip, and you go, well, then tomorrow's a PTO day. and then and then and then she, and then our counterpart goes, hell to the yeah, and she's like slamming him in.
Uh-huh.
And she goes, so she turns to me, she goes, sorry, buddy, you're gonna have to stay here tomorrow. Somebody needs coverage.
It's
She goes,
so
why don't we do our
funny.
transition here? So our Thursday became Friday.
Yeah.
And you were just, you were that person that I sat back and I just started laughing. I'm like, gosh, this is a heyday, isn't it? This is a heyday. This is going to be a good time.
I know. I
And we
do
were
think
killing it.
about those times a
We
little
were
bit.
killing it too.
Yeah, no, we were good. Yeah, they liked us very much. In fact, I was doing so good there that the other side of the room kept trying to like recruit me away from you. I don't know if you knew that. You probably did.
Oh yeah.
But I was like, no, I don't. I want to work with Brandon. I don't want to go to the other side of the room.
I don't want to go to the other side. He at least has a vibe, he at least has a vague hetero, vibe. I can at least sit with this. I can't this in case it turns.
Everyone over there is so buttoned up and very corporate. And I was like, I can't. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. If I could get back half of what that other half of the room stole from me, I'd be
I'll tell you quickly before we move on. In the interview for that job, you said the phrase to me. It was so corporate-y. Before you relaxed into like really getting to know me, you started off corporate.
Oh, and always.
Which is probably like your
that was my front. I needed that.
Yeah. So I was wearing a button-down shirt with a tie, but for whatever reason, maybe it was like hot that day. I don't remember, but for whatever reason, I had rolled up my sleeves and cuffed them. And I don't know why I did that, but I was sitting there, you came in and you were like all suited up. And then you sat down, you were like, all right, this is who I am, this is the company, this is what we do, blah, 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 blah. And then you looked me in the eye and you went, and I see that your sleeves are rolled up, Jim. That means that you like to get to work. And it was so corporate and hilarious and not you that I still think of it to this day. And I want you to know, Brandon, that when I'm interviewing people, I will drop that in there and I'll think about you every time. I'll be like, this is a real roll up your sleeves and get to work environment,
That's so awesome.
Hilarious.
That's so awesome. Yeah. And it's funny because I didn't know if I wanted to go down the, Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar way of life, or if I wanted to be I'm just going to duck and cover and take my vacation time. Like I was really on that, thing. And I got a ton of accolades from that company, a ton, being a top performer and all that other stuff. But on the flip side of that, I was like, oh, this is so farcical. So anyway, so we're going to restart this I'm going to pull up all these really fun questions and we're going to have 5 good minutes. Now, Jim, what we do during these 5 good minutes is I'm going to ask you a series of questions. You have 3 seconds to answer, and then I move on. This is meant for you to be able to just say, speak, talk about something right off the top of your head. And again, that space is about how long you have to start your answer, but I will absolutely let you finish whatever it is that your thought is. Fair enough?
Good. Sounds good.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
I'm nervous.
This is my
yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad because you're so good under pressure, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the part where you sip
But
your
that's the pressure because everyone knows I'm good under pressure. That's pressure.
I mean, you are a Queen song. All right, you ready?
Okay.
5 minutes on the clock here. And by the way, I really do put 5 minutes on the clock. And as soon as I can figure out all of my video stuff, I will actually put up 5 minutes on the video. Who knows? You may be the first one. All right, here we go. Jim Lanahan with 5 good minutes. All right, Jim, you ready?
Ready.
Great. What is your favorite chakra?
The one right here between my eyes.
Well versed as well. Fantastic. Iced or hot coffee?
I mean iced.
Are you sure? Even on a day like today?
It's an amateur question. Yes.
Okay, amateur. Well, they're called softballs.
Sorry.
What is the one regret you had in theater?
That I could not make it work with that one legendary diva.
Love that answer. By the way, you're going to stick around for 3 good minutes afterwards for my members. How about the place in the world you haven't been to yet, but you are absolutely going?
Italy.
Favorite place you've been that you tell everybody about?
Tokyo.
Favorite boss of all time?
Chris Cronky. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Brandon.
Totally set you up on that. It's okay. It's all good. It's all good.
She is, though, and I tell her all the time. She's the legendary boss. I could not have asked for more. Yeah,
awesome. I love that you're honoring her. Where is what's the next step in terms of your career? What's the next step after theater? After theater management?
I don't know. Probably business owner.
I like that a lot. No names. What is the worst position a client has put you in?
Asking me to lie for them.
Oh, good one. East Coast or West Coast?
These days, West Coast.
Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Dunkin'.
I know. Listen, pumpkin spice forever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not down with that, but you can be. All right. How do you feel your mother will show you who she is after she's gone? What sign is she going to give you?
She's going to come to me at bedtime, I think. And I will see her and hear her when I'm falling asleep.
Who's your secret celebrity crush? Or who's the celebrity crush that you just can't you'll always have as a crush?
I think it's so random, but Jesse Bradford. It's worth a Google.
It's worth a Google.
Yeah.
He's apparently your little secret.
Yeah.
On more than one level. All right. Job that you wish you always had, but you haven't had a chance to have yet.
I want to work for Oprah and make dreams come true.
Don't you know Oprah? Didn't you actually produce one of her shows?
I produced a show, yeah, but it was like 3 steps of separation. But I met her 3 or 4 times.
That's cool. Well, that was going to be my next question. Who's the most famous person you've met?
Oh, Oprah or Tony Bennett.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. By the way, I kind of thought you would say that. What do you want your legacy to be?
I want everybody to remember a time they were talking to me and they felt like I was singularly focused on them. I always try to leave every interaction with a positive result.
When was the last time you meditated?
Oh my God, way too long ago, like 3 or 4 months. It's a real problem.
Oh my God, really? 3 or 4 months? How are you a life coach?
I know, it's a problem.
Favorite find you've ever had at a secondary store?
Oh my God, probably my lucite ice bucket that I picked up a few weeks ago. And then it turned out that the person that donated it was my realtor here in Palm Springs.
Shut up.
And she said, I could have just given it to you. And I was like, this is the circle of life. So next time I'm just going to go to her house and go shopping.
And by the way, that's worth a follow on your Instagram alone, just when you
Yeah.
go thrifting. Your thrift days are amazing. What advice would you give to somebody that asks for just help? Just asking for help. What's your best
Mm,
advice? Where do you start?
I think they need to call me. I don't know where to start with that. I need to know more.
Oh, so you want to discuss it through. You're about to write a book. What is it going to be about?
It's all the Broadway secrets that are in my head that people would plots over the
No
years.
names, no names, but give us the vibe of one of those secrets.
I was at a party once, at a famous director choreographer's house, and I saw multiple people doing multiple things, illegal and otherwise,
Of
on
course.
balconies and pool tables.
Listen, you've lived a life. And by the way, that is sometimes the best life coaches. And that's why we call this the 5 good minutes. All right, we're gonna finish strong, and we're gonna do two things with this. We're gonna start to wrap up, and then once I'm gonna stop the recording, and then I'm gonna start it again for our members. And by the way, if you want to see
Cool.
that coverage, I'm gonna ask a very specific question, and it's still kind of in private. You have to be a member in order to see it. But listen, I also wrap up the show with what I call the heart tap. And if you watch anything that I do on Whiskey and Bagels and any of the other stuff, the heart tap, which means something very important to me, because it came from a place of being able to say, the heart tap is like, just because we're not together doesn't mean I can't give you the heart tap. So I want you to think about who you want to dedicate your heart tap to. It can be more than one person, it can be a group of people, it can be whoever it is that you want to. But what you're doing is you're wishing them well and you're letting them know you love and care for them. So who do you want to give out your heart tap to?
I have a lot of friends that are losing parents lately, and
Yeah.
expectedly and unexpectedly. But in the past week, two friends lost their parents completely unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm at that age where all my friends are just starting to feel the struggle of caregiving and or feeling grief over loss. And
Yeah.
I think it's a really specific, an age specific thing that
Yeah.
I am acknowledging more and more.
And it's amazing. One of those things that, you get to that part in life where maybe you went through what you went through so you could be the strong one for them. And I
Yeah.
see you do that over and over again. And, I'm giving my heart tap to you because I see you doing the work and you help so many people. And I see those comments and I know where they come from. And you are that beacon, you are that lighthouse for them. Whether you signed up for it or not, you play the role so well, that it's kind of like that Broadway. When Robin Williams would get a script and they'd say, well, we wrote it with you in mind. He was like, well, I guess I have to take it then.
Mm,
And that's you. That's you. You're
mm,
like, well, okay, I guess I have to be this person for you. And I see you do it over and over again. So,
mm.
mm,
Thank
it's-
you.
so we're going to
Thank you.
wrap up the Stream of Consciousness podcast with a heart tap. And Jim, go ahead. Say who you're giving this out to again.
To everybody who's struggling with caregiving of elderly parents and people that have lost parents and elder loved ones this year.
Awesome. That's
So
awesome. Well, we give each other the heart tap to tell one another we care and love for each other and remind you to simply keep going. Thanks so much, Jim. I love you from the bottom of my heart. You're one of my favorite people,
thanks,
humans.
Brandon.
Well,
Love you.
one of my favorite humans. I'm sorry, I don't mean to degrade you, but that's, I wasn't in your clique.